folks want access. They want to be respected as a dissident. They want to have it both ways. They want to be seen as a dissident, and they want to have favorable reviews in the New York Times, because that's how you get to be famous and sell books and have influence, right? And so you learn early on, if you have any social sense and can read the room, that there are certain ideological lines that you don't cross, and that is.
Christian Parenti is an investigative journalist, academic, and the author of several books, including Lockdown America, Police and Prisons in the Age of Crisis. He's reported from various locations such as Afghanistan, Iraq, Venezuela, and China, and his work has been featured in the HBO documentary Fixer, The Taking of Hajjom. Oh, I can't say that name. It happens every time. Currently, he is a professor of economics at John Jay College, criminal justice in New York City, and the son of Michael Parenti. Please welcome back to the show, Christian Parenti.
Hello, Jimmy, and hello, everyone.
So now we did I'll put a link in the description of this, that we did a tribute to your father, who's just he's a real leftist, right? And he was a real advocate for the working man, unlike some people. Well, first of all, let me just, Noam Chomsky turns up in the Epstein files, and it turns out that he was cavorting with the same people he claimed to be opposed to publicly, but privately, he's hanging out with all these people. Ehud Barak, he's hanging out with Steve Bannon, who he called horrible things, and of course Jeffrey Epstein. But a lot of people have brought up your father's name in relation to Noam Chomsky, and how Noam Chomsky kind of hung your father out to dry, because he was doing the real duty of sticking up for workers and working coalitions and socialism, and Noam Chomsky wasn't. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, there was conflict between, or intellectual differences between my father and Chomsky that went back to the questions about the JFK assassination. After Oliver Stone's movie comes out in the late 80s, that initiates, even though it's just a Hollywood movie, that initiates a national conversation about the assassination. And many left intellectuals weighed in, and you would be surprised at the number who sought to shore up their credibility with the mainstream by poo-pooing the idea that is, supported by enormous amounts of evidence, that the Central Intelligence Agency was involved in a conspiracy to assassinate Kennedy. And so my father was one of the few Marxist public intellectuals, or intellectuals of any sort, who went out and put their reputation on the line to say, no, the evidence suggests that the CIA had a large role in this conspiracy to kill the president. And that's significant for a number of reasons. For one thing, it tells us, if we look at it and study it, it can tell us something about how power works in this society. Peter Dale Scott, professor at UC Berkeley, former Canadian diplomat, he was, in the forefront of this. But the vast majority of leftists poo-poo this. Unfortunately, Alexander Coburn, who in many ways I have a lot of respect for, he passed away 10 or 15 years ago, but was very critical of this. He said in The Nation, doesn't matter how Kennedy died because he was an ardent anti-communist, and Chomsky the same thing. And the fact of the matter is that Kennedy was changing, and he did stuff like had a unilateral test ban treaty. He opened a secret channel with the Soviets. He was opening a secret channel of negotiation with Fidel in Cuba. He really, it seemed, wanted to de-escalate the Cold War, and was assassinated in that. He did not give the CIA sufficient support during the Bay of Pigs, had a conflict in the beginning of his presidency with the CIA over that, said that he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind, fired Allen Dulles, who had been in charge of the CIA. He was only the third director of the CIA. He came in quite in the early 50s, quite early in the agency's history, and basically built the whole thing, and Kennedy fired him. So anyway, that was the beginning of differences between Chomsky and my father. And then it also involved the fact that my father supported actually existing socialism, the Soviet Union, Sandinista Nicaragua, you know, and it's not because he thought these were flawless societies, not at all. If you read his book, Black Shirts and Red, you see he has very strident critiques of the Soviet Union, but he was very practical about how he saw the possibilities of social change. And he realized that this was not like some sort of like buffet menu where you could choose exactly the flavor of socialism you wanted and mix and match the qualities that you wanted. Rather you received history as it was with all of its flaws. And my father thought it was not realistic to think that the world was going to be better off without these states. And also he realized that places like the Soviet Union were evolving, just as the United States evolves, right? I mean, the Soviet Union had some unbelievably horrible qualities to it. The purges, in which is like, you know, killing members of the party who were, you know, loyal to the revolution. But, you know, that wasn't the entire history. It's also evolving towards something more rational. Same way the United States, if you say the United States, all you need to know about the United States was that it, you know, it had slavery. It's like, you need to know that the United States was built in large part on slavery. But if you reduce your understanding of the country to that, it's totally inadequate. The country has evolved for better and for worse. I mean, in odd ways. You know, it's not that all evolution is good, but I mean, it's changing and evolving, right? So those were the kinds of positions my father took, and that was not cool with people like Chomsky, who had a kind of like, you know, Chomsky called himself an anarcho-syndicalist or something like that, and you know, had a sort of a purist sense of being a leftist, and criticized actually existing socialist regimes, you know, for their real faults, but you know, didn't support left forces in the same way here in the heart of the empire. Or that's what my father's view of it would have been.
Yeah, that's also my view. And you know, Chomsky dismissing inquiries into the JFK assassination is a red flag. Just like he said, well, even if it was a conspiracy, who cares? What? Who cares? Yeah. Who committed a coup on the United States government? Who cares? Yeah. Who cares if our own intelligence agency was involved? Who cares if another country was involved? Who cares if Lyndon Baines Johnson, his vice president, was involved? Who cares about that stuff? That to me was a red flag, meaning that Chomsky was definitely covering up for something. That doesn't make, because there's no other thing that makes sense unless he was compromised and he was covering up for that. Just the way he dismissed all the legitimate inquiries into 9/11 or COVID or anything. Would you agree with that?
Remember, and then he told that horrible quote of, you know, people who are unvaccinated, you know, it's up to them to, what it was like,
they should isolate themselves.
Banned from supermarkets.
They should be isolated from society. And that when asked how would they get food, he said that's their problem.
Yeah.
that was Chomsky's.
Yeah,
but
well, I don't know. I mean, whether or not I mean the whole idea that he was compromised, maybe I don't know. But you know, there's plenty of pressure on intellectuals prior to that kind of thing of being compromised, which is that, you know, folks want access. They want to get publishing deals with publishing houses that are going to invest in their books. They want to be respected as a dissident. They want to have it both ways. They want to be seen as a dissident, and they want to have favorable reviews in the New York Times, because that's how you get to be famous and sell books and have influence, right? And so you learn early on, if you have any social sense and can read the room, that there are certain ideological lines that you don't cross, and that at a certain point you need to suspend your critical thinking and just realize, like, that's a third rail. If you touch that, you are never going to be reviewed in the New York Times. You are never going to be taken on by a large commercial house. You're going to be relegated to small independent publications, etc., right? And my father was acutely aware of that, and he was pugnacious enough and had a deep enough sense of fairness that and a deep enough commitment to what he saw as the truth and critical inquiry, that he wasn't going to trim his sails to try and get in the good favor of the gatekeepers.
I mean,
my father was red baited, was very severely red baited out of academia. He was a star student at Yale. He was part of a very legendary class of PhDs at Yale. He was doing quite well, and then he became a radical and then a Marxist. I mean, first a sort of like anti-war radical, but then a Marxist in the 70s. And he was systematically red baited. Now, when I say that, what am I talking about? I'm talking about like how in 3 different jobs, he had the entire department, the dean, even the president of the university saying, we want to hire this guy. And then the board of trustees would come in and say, no, can't hire this guy. That's very rare. When you have the entire institution saying, we want this person in our faculty, generally the board of trustees stays out of it. But in 3 different cases, his candidacies for tenure track jobs were killed by above the president of the university at the board of trustees. And he was also involved in one incident in University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, with 2 other guys who, and one of whom actually they were all suffering this red baiting for a number of years. And then one of them, they were both my godfathers, Phil Moranto and Rocco Lombardi, John Lombardi. John Lombardi, who was a chemist, during one job he was applying for, some dean said afterwards, we got a letter from the president of Champaign-Urbana saying this guy Lombardi is a red, don't hire him. And then Lombardi got a lawyer that threatened the next job that Lombardi applied for, which was actually City University of New York, CUNY. And his lawyer said, threatened Champaign-Urbana's president, said, we have a copy of this letter and we're prepared to sue you if there's any interference in this job. And there wasn't. He got the job because he's a fantastic chemist. He's sort of one of the best in his field. But, that's an indication that, Moranto and my father were also having similar problems. Probably letters like that had gone around in their cases as well. But so that's why when I use the term red baiting, when I use the term blacklisting, I'm using it like sort of clinically, specifically, not kind of euphemistically.
Right. And so just to kind of put a button on it with Chomsky, that, Chomsky enjoyed tenure his whole career at MIT, and which we all know is infested with the CIA. And so whereas a fellow like Michael Parenti, your father, who was the real deal, was blackballed. And in fact, he felt betrayed by academia, correct?
Yeah. I mean, he felt, yeah.
Yeah, he was
iced out by his discipline, which, he had been much appreciated in his discipline until he crossed a line. And that line was defending actually existing socialism. It was, descending from abstractions about socialism to actual elections, saying stuff in the mid 80s like, the Sandinistas, not only in Nicaragua, not only hold democratic elections, they hold elections that are more democratic than the United States because they allow all of this observation, and foreign funding. I mean, they're much more open than ours are. That was too much. You got to keep it at the realm of abstraction. You can be quite radical at the realm of abstraction, but you start really pushing back against the actual policies of the government consistently like that. And it gets much more intense. And also, defending the Soviet Union. I mean, he wasn't without his criticisms of it, but that was just like, you could not do that. And all of those kind of frontline third international revolutions in Mozambique, in Angola, the Cuban Revolution. My father had critiques of them, but he defended their right to pursue their own course of development. He defended the right of those revolutions to exist, and he drew attention instead to the U.S. empire's efforts to murderously and illegally and dishonestly and through conspiracy undermine and destroy those revolutions in some of the most horrific ways possible, through terrorism against civilians, through terrorism against the social service apparatus and economic developmental apparatus of these revolutions, going down and CIA funding the Contras in Nicaragua to go out and kill nurses, burn schools, rape and kill American nuns at one time. That's when they went too far, and there was finally some pushback from Congress and some limits put on funding for the Contras in Nicaragua. But that was going on in the 80s. There was a whole front line of hot wars that the U.S. was covertly funding and were utterly murderous.
Come see me on tour. I'll be in Lansing, Milwaukee, Albuquerque, Houston, Dallas, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. If you go anywhere else, you're going to pay more.